The Bear has returned for its fourth consecutive year with what isn't necessarily positioned as the final season, but it definitely felt like there was a sense of finality with Season 4. With Season 3 feeling like it took a real dip in quality, I was skeptical for the first time entering a new season of this show, but it's safe to say that it delivered something that was far better than what was the third installment. With an overriding sense of togetherness, the value of family, and the ambition of trying to keep the restaurant open during its time of struggle, the ending of this season saw something happen which I feel none of us truly expected. But what it also showed us was that Carmy was very much like his mother, which has been at the heart of every season. So with that, let's dive into Season 4 of The Bear. Let it rip. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The ending explained. When it came to the ending of this season, there was an even deeper meaning behind every second counts, the phrase which the show was built around following Season 2 Episode 7, as we saw a literal timer that was in the kitchen which was counting down the seconds until Jimmy stopped investing in the business and was threatening to pull the plug. This was due to the restaurant struggling and it not showing any true signs of improving following the bad review that caused all of the drama at the end of Season 3. By the time it got to the final episode, we saw that Carmy had come to the decision that he no longer wanted to be involved in owning the restaurant and decided that he'd remove himself from the agreement that was in place and leave, instead leaving it with Sydney and Sugar. All throughout this season, there were signs of him losing his love for the very thing that he'd spent his whole life trying to get good at. With him resonating with the movie Groundhog Day, that was the first sign of it, because to him, it felt like every day was the same, which is why he was looking for those small things in those days, such as changing up the menu to try and differentiate them. Plus, Sugar also said to him back at the start about how it was okay if he was losing the passion, and if he wanted to step back from it all because she could see what it was doing to him, as the spark in his eyes when he left for New York was no longer there. Also, pair that with the fact that there was a scene of Sydney cooking, almost looking like a choreographed scene on a stage with the multicolored lights in the background, which showed that she had passion and electricity, something that Carmy could see himself. And also with Albert Schnurr, the mentor, saying that the first essential to starting a business is that you had to be passionate about it. Carmy didn't have that at all. So he recognized that if he was at the wheel of the Bear, then it was destined to continue to fail. Going right the way back to the first episode of the season, during the flashback, we saw that Carmy wanted to originally open up a restaurant with his brother, and that was the project that he was passionate about. So when he died, he thought that opening up this restaurant would almost be for him, and that would be enough to carry him through. But after speaking with his mother, something that he hadn't done for a long while due to all of the trauma that he went through, he soon saw that he opened up that restaurant as a coping mechanism and as a way of avoiding talking about the fact that he wasn't there for his brother at the end and that he hadn't dealt with his death properly. So Carmy's lack of passion and the newfound mindset that he has of wanting to actually deal with his issues and the grief that he avoided is the very thing that he's going to be doing moving forward. I actually thought that it was quite poetic that he only came to that realization because he went and spoke to his mother for the first time in years. The very thing that he was always so anxious about. With her apologizing to him and saying how much she felt that she let all three of her children down, he saw how she recognized her own flaws and that she was trying to do better, and that was the exact mindset that he took away from meeting her, showing just how similar the both of them were. There was a powerful speech between Richie and Carmy outside the back of the restaurant where the both of them were honest and open for the first time about Mike and his death. Richie basically spoke about how he was once envious of Carmy and how he resented him for the fact that he had this family and this relationship with Mikey that he knew that he could never have. And then on the flip side, Carmy also said that he felt the same thing about Richie because he saw how close Richie and his brother were. With Richie being put on the agreement at the end of the season, it showed just how much of a journey that Richie had been on throughout the show. He once lacked purpose and felt like he had no family, but by the end of the season, we saw that he had a newfound purpose, something to work towards, and a family that were the people in the Bear. He was the sand that he said that he was, keeping all of the rocks which represented families together. With the timer finally reaching zero and Sugar being proud of Carmy for being willing to walk away and deal with his issues, that does leave the show open to return. The restaurant needs to find a way to stay afloat, plus there was also the deal that could be happening with the beef which was proving to be profitable, so that avenue could be explored if the showrunners do decide to bring the show back. However, for now, it's a somewhat happy ending where all of the issues were resolved. Marcus was awarded Best New Chef, Tina got her perfected cooking time on the pasta, Sweet was mastering his craft of wine, Ibra was working on the new business venture, and the restaurant was going to stay open regardless because when asked the question by the computer, why would you want to operate like this? It was because the bear was a family, which actually ties into my next point of the video. The core theme of the season. Family felt like it was the core theme that I took away from this season, and it was brought to light most in episode 7 of the show. An episode number that never fails to deliver in any of the seasons of The Bear. This was the episode that was about Tiff and Frank's wedding. What started off with us being led to believe that it would be a Fishes 2.0 and turn into utter bizarro chaos and show just how dysfunctional the family were, it actually turned out to be the complete opposite. And it showed how that dysfunctionality is what allowed this family to thrive and be at its best. Everybody underneath the table sharing what all of their biggest fears were was what enabled Ava to finally admit that dancing was something that she was afraid of. But we also saw at the same time that through everybody dancing and being together at the end, it then enabled her to confront her biggest fear and go to the dance floor during the climax of the episode. Something which showed how that sense of togetherness was what enabled that family to shine even in its darkest moments. Richie also saw himself as a different vessel in life and that he wasn't a rock which represented a singular family. Instead, he was the sand that lay underneath it because he was a part of each and every one of those families that were present in the room. He was the singular point of connection which showed that he had that in abundance. That sense of family was something that was also at the heart of the restaurant. The restaurant was almost like Little Ava's mind in the sense that it was filled with panic, fear, and as well, it was showing signs of not achieving what it set out to do. However, the only thing that was holding it together was that sense of camaraderie, the love that they each had for each other, and the family that had been built. That was actually the only reason that Sydney decided to stay at the Bear and not jump the sinking ship and go to work with Shapiro. She valued the family that was in the staff and even the guests. As Richie said himself, every guest is family. Sydney was also told how sometimes your work family is closer than your family, and I think she recognized how she genuinely cared about each and every person that was at the Bear as if they were an extension to her own family. We even saw that once you were a bear, you stayed one. This was through Tiff and the fact that barely any of her own family were present at her wedding to Frank, but there were more bizarros. She even said that she was worried that she'd lose them all following the divorce to Richie, but there they all still were. I'd even say that family was at the heart of making an experience for a dinner at the Bear, in the sense that the team went above and beyond to make the snow experience outside for the family that were visiting Chicago, and with Richie looking on and seeing the value of that togetherness, something he didn't recognize back then, he found it by the end. So family, the very thing we were made to see caused all of the chaos in the Bizarro's life, turned out to actually be the very thing that gave them the most value in life too. They had their own way of doing it, but we saw that it was the glue that held everybody that was welcomed in the doors of the Bear together. My review of the season. I thought this was a solid season of the Bear. Do I think it was as good as Season 1 and Season 2? No, I don't. I feel like that was peak the Bear and it won't be beaten. But I would say that this season was definitely better than Season 3. I feel it had many of the things that makes the show good. From a stylistic perspective, it had those harsh abrupt cuts which made you feel a part of the arguments that were taking place. It had the gorgeous shots of the food that made your mouth water. It had the emotion that would hit you out of the blue, such as Sydney's father having a heart attack, and it also had the standalone episodes that were memorable for all of the right reasons. For me, I'd say that episode 4, which was focused on Sydney around her cousin's house, and also episode 7, which was the episode focused on the wedding, were my two favourites. What I loved about episode 4 was that in a show that was dominated by every second counting and time being of the essence, this was the episode where time stood still for Sydney, and it was shown to us by the oven clock not being set and just flashing in the background. It gave her time to breathe and for her mind to rest and come to terms with her decision making. Then with episode 7, it had the whole family out, returning cast members, and the fact that it was opposite to Fishes and it almost showed how people can change if you give them time was a really nice touch. One thing I'd say that this season lacked when compared to the early seasons was that feature where the odd episode would be focused on an individual. There also weren't that many flashbacks, which I thought was a bit of a shame, as it felt like the emotional pull to Mikey wasn't quite there as much because this was the least that we'd seen him in a season. I felt that lack of character focus and having trials and tribulations, such as Marcus being in Copenhagen and losing his mother, Tina struggling to find work but Mikey giving her a chance, Richie finding the ability to change and learn new skills, and even Sugar being reunited with her mother in the most uncomfortable circumstances were all phenomenal moments from previous seasons. And I'd say that this season probably lacked that for me, but it doesn't take loads away from the season. I'd say Sydney got a large focus in season 4, and I thought that was fair as in the end Carmy basically said that she was the bear, as she was everything that he'd never be. So it showed how the show was just as much about her as it was about the Bizartos. Whilst there were emotional moments in this season, I'd say that this was probably the least emotional that a season had been for me. It was heavy, but it didn't have the emotion that I'm used to. Whilst on the topic of it being heavy, there's no way that this season should be listed in the comedy category at the Emmys. If it is, then that is a joke. When it comes to the performances of the cast, that's where this show truly does shine. You're emotionally invested in all of them, and with a show that's so heavily focused on a family, that's exactly what you're looking for. You're that extra person that's at the wedding and under the table. You're Auntie Jane or Uncle John just sitting there observing and watching the beauty and the chaos that's unfolding. If this is the final season of The Bear and the ending is left open for interpretation, then I think fair enough. It's a fairly appropriate way for the show to go, but at the same time, if they do want to bring the show back, then I'd be more than happy to see how the restaurant gets out of its struggles and also what Carmy would get up to next. But what I will say is if Carmy isn't involved in the restaurant, I don't think there's a show there. So I'm probably more on the side of let's just leave the show where it is and put our imagination to work and just picture how things could unfold for them. So, there you have it, The Bear Season 4 ending explained. If you want to see Season 2 or Season 3 of The Bear being broken down, or many videos breaking down specific episodes, then check the playlists below. And don't forget to subscribe, as I'll be dropping a few videos about this season as well. What did you think of The Bear Season 4? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.